Begin with breaking news on the Ethiopian Airlines crash. Ethiopia's transport minister says the plane's flight data recorder shows similarities with the crash of the same model Boeing 737 MAX 8 back in October. Let's get right to CNN's Richard Quest. So, Richard, what are you learning?
The Ethiopian Transport Minister was speaking in Paris, where, of course, the flight data and the cockpit voice recorders are being read out by the BEA, which is the French authority. What we now understand is what people had suspected. He said that there are certain similarities between the Lion Air crash back in October and the Ethiopian crash earlier this month. Now, what those similarities were, he didn't say or didn't go further. He said that more details would be given in the preliminary report, which is to be presented in 30 days. Now, it's an international treaty requirement under so-called Annex 13 for the investigating authority, in this case the Ethiopians, to produce such a report. The prelim report is usually quite simple. It gives you some very basic facts about what happened to the flight, what they know about it, but it also gives you a window into what the investigators believe might be the cause or the areas they're looking at. So, Frederica, most certainly tonight we're talking about these similarities, and by that I'm assuming those similarities are the pitch of the aircraft and the altitude variations that took place and the speed of both flights. The Ethiopian flight failed to gain speed very similarly to the other one. We await further details, but it is an important development.
So then, Richard, does this raise more questions about why Boeing or the FAA or, the equivalency abroad, didn't ground this airline sooner, just as a precaution?
Yes, absolutely. Now, the FAA said back earlier in the week, when they weren't grounding, there was no data. There was no hard data upon which they had reason to ground. But that's simply not true. The coincidence and similarities alone were reason enough for the British, the Germans, the Australians, the Chinese, the list goes on and on. All these other organizations found the mere similarities alone without further evidential data to ban the plane. The FAA chose in those circumstances to take a purely data-driven approach, and they boasted about it in their announcements. Well, there will be those who will say, no, they should have taken a common sense approach. And there was sufficient evidence for many reputable organizations to ban and to ground the planes. And the FAA should have been more open to the prospect of the similarity.
And making way for the use negligence might be used in any kind of legal challenges that may be upcoming.
No,
Richard,
I don't. No,
you don't think so?
I wouldn't say. I'm not necessarily saying negligence, because they have a duty, and it's arguably. I think just common sense. The FAA. It's difficult to understand, Frederica, why the FAA was so stubborn in sticking to their position when everybody else was saying the opposite. That, of course, will be the issue.
We shall see. All right, Richard Quest, thank you so much.